Although it's important to be transparent as possible to our business partners and to get their support before moving ahead with anything new that'll cost the company money, we have our own important reasons for moving away from code-first practices to a more planned approach. The first is maintenance. Application owners change from time to time, and asking a new analyst to assume an application or piece of software without adequate documentation is really a no-win situation. The analyst cannot be expected to get up to speed anytime soon, and the application support will almost certainly suffer. Even if the owner was involved in the creation of the software, it still lowers maintenance fees if there are reference materials and modeling or flow diagrams at least in some degree of detail. Next is object-oriented principles. As we'll see in later presentations, going through the process of modeling business functions forces the team to look at individual portions of a process and promotes modular interpretation and development practices. Promoted IT and developer education. By having an at-a-glance view of an application's functionality, it helps to educate the developers not only on how the application works, but moreover how it's designed. This in turn helps them to understand the context of the business, which is all too often a neglected tool that we can give our developers. Testing. Although in many environments it's typical for the developer to perform system testing, not a best practice, there will be times where we request that a separate QA group perform the tests. Without documentation which describes the flow of the application and what's supposed to happen, there's no chance at all that the test will be thorough and things will definitely be missed. In other words, if action A occurs on object number 2, what should happen to object 2? Even if we write detailed test cases, it's important and helpful if we can provide supplementary documentation to help the QA group test things that the developer or systems analyst didn't think of. Now there's no question that a never-ending challenge among all companies is to rein in IT costs. Some companies have undertaken huge projects which are designed in part to provide more value to the business partners, while vendor consolidation and changes in the request stream will help reduce costs and make IT groups as a whole more transparent. We really need to ensure that we're following the best practices in the actual creation of business solutions in order to fully optimize the IT organizations. If we can establish a culture that fosters proper design, planning, and object-oriented approach, we can provide the maximum value from a development standpoint to the business. Now, in keeping with our discussion about modeling, let's talk about it in the context of Agile. So this graphic should tell the tale well. There are several contradictions, some perceived and some true, between Agile and traditional development techniques as well and modeling. Many companies, as you know, have gone to an Agile software development model at various levels of diligence throughout the IT organization. Since we're talking about modeling and architecture here, it's important that we discuss it in the context of Agile. If we don't, most who are watching this presentation will constantly be thinking, this will never work in our world. However, I think you'll see that modeling and UML can not only coexist in an Agile world, but enhance the process very well. Although for this presentation, I will not go deeply into what Agile is, let's review the main concepts so we're all on the same page. Here are Agile's guiding principles. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The focus is on developers and customers and their collaboration. Process and tools should support actual work, getting software produced and delivered with maximum possible combined speed and quality. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Software is the means to and the end of development, so to produce and deliver, writing software is the essential activity. Even though documentation, or at least documenting ongoing development, is necessary, it should not be the focus. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Working closely with customers is better than specifications or strict requirements resulting from lengthy negotiations. Designs and implementations can be constantly steered and corrected if or when necessary. Responding to change over following a plan. Strict planning is often impossible in complex system development projects. The first answer to this is to plan even more and be stricter in the face of change. The second and better way to answer this is to accept change and develop according to this. And this will definitely make you much more friendly with the business units. Now for the contradictions that we've been talking about. UML is really all about process and somewhat dependent on tools. The definition of working UML is focused around documentation. Typically, modeling forces strict requirements and timely changes. And finally, UML is designed to reduce changes by clarifying business process. So, throughout the rest of this presentation, I will be assuming and understanding that we need to always consider the ability to quickly respond to requests throughout the many iterations in the project lifecycle, and that modeling and architecture should not impede that goal. Now last November, I attended the Visual Studio Live conference in Austin, and I had a long post-presentation discussion with one of the project leaders on the C# team for Microsoft. We discussed how they actually coordinate projects and transfer knowledge of a business request into a technology framework or a plan. After discussing the various processes, he made it a point to emphasize that they rely heavily on whiteboard discussions to both understand and communicate business functions and requests. Again, it's important that when we discuss a request with the business, we need to help them communicate the details of their current and proposed business process. By visualizing these concepts, we can not only help them structure the actual process, but we can ourselves better understand their request. And just as a side note, I want to emphasize that whenever you get involved in a whiteboard type discussion or session, always copy what you outlined on paper. Too many times you'll see somebody going over requirements and getting a good understanding of a process up on a whiteboard, only to erase it and leave. 2 days later, when they're trying to formalize a discussion in the UML document, they can't remember or miss an important part of the original discussion. Now in the past, most modeling that has been done has typically been done using Visio without any real formal structure to it. Visio is popular for one reason, because it's an expanded part of Microsoft Office, the largest business software suite by far. And second, because it's pretty simple to drag and drop objects onto the screen, and it also has a familiar look and feel to it. Perhaps one of the most common uses of Visio today is workflow diagrams and network architecture drawings. I listed some of the pros and cons, which are very subjective but based in part on my experience with using it. Using Visio certainly has its place in our modeling world, however it should never be used or considered to be the all-in-one modeling tool. Now again, this presentation isn't really meant to discuss in detail how to use these tools or analyze them in depth. However, just to let you know that they're out there and give you a couple options of what you can use. Power Designer is a tool of choice for modeling out applications in many companies. In fact, in our next presentation, we're going to go into detail on how to create documentation using this tool. There are several thousand features contained within Power Designer. However, it is intuitive enough where you can open it up and start using it right away. One misconception with this tool is that it's only good for database modeling. On the contrary, you can create it to create use case diagrams, class diagrams, sequence diagrams, and just about any type of UML diagram that exists today. Although I only mentioned really 2 tools here in this presentation, 2 modeling tools, there are a host of excellent tools out there, like Rational Rows, Magic Draw, and Hibernate, Enterprise Architect, and these are all very good options. The key, of course, is if you do have modeling software, is to use it. Again, we'll be showing some very good examples and demos utilizing some of this software, so stay tuned for that.